Goedenavond iedereen, goedenamiddag, goedenavond. We gaan stilletjes aan toch van start gaan met het slotstuk. Goede timing begint steeds met een strikt of een stipt begin natuurlijk. We geven altijd een beetje marge, maar met het cultureel programma in het achterhoofd willen we nu toch echt wel uitstel uitstellen. Of vermijden is eigenlijk beter gezegd. Ja. Goed. Beste collega's, de eerste reeks parallelsessies zit erop. Ongetwijfeld zijn er al heel wat ideeën uitgewisseld, heel wat energie doorgegeven tussen verre en minder verre collega's. Ik ben Dennis Monte, verbonden aan Vives en KU Leuven en mede-coördinator van dit congres samen met mijn collega Dirk Gombert. Blij jullie hier te ontmoeten in elk geval. Ik heb het plezier gehad jullie al enkelen onder jullie, misschien wel al velen onder jullie, wat wegwijs te mogen maken in het gebouw. Ondertussen is de hoofdstructuur van het gebouw hopelijk wat duidelijk en dat zal ongetwijfeld morgen allemaal net iets vlotter gaan. Wat betreft die lokalen, toch nog even een praktische mededeling. Niet iedereen onder jullie had op de app effectief de lokalen staan. Dat heeft te maken met een update. Als jouw toestel niet automatisch die updates doet, dan kan het zijn dat die lokalen daar niet op stonden. Als je vanuit het startscherm eventjes de 3 puntjes rechtsbovenaan je scherm aanklikt en dan kom je via check update. Als je dat even probeert, dan zou normaal gezien zouden de lokalen opnieuw moeten verschijnen in jullie programma. Dat eventjes tussendoor. Ja. Ik heb vandaag de eer om onze tweede keynote te mogen aankondigen. En niet zomaar een keynote, het is direct onze internationale keynote-spreker. Ik wil dan ook in eerste instantie onze partner VVOB bedanken om mee te ondersteunen in de organisatie daarvan. We verwelkomen professor Saloshna Vandeyar. Met haar 20 jaar ervaring in de Universiteit van Pretoria heeft zij heel wat expertise opgedaan in zaken diversiteit in onderwijs. Ze heeft die opgedaan in de faculteit Humanities Education. Wat dat betreft zijn we alvast zeer verheugd haar hier toch te mogen verwelkomen. Aanvankelijk was het idee dat ze hier in levende lijve zou zijn, maar uiteindelijk bleek dat toch niet mogelijk. Dankzij de digitalisering kunnen we haar toch vanuit Zuid-Afrika live binnentrekken en kan zij toch even haar ding en haar kaders met ons delen. Dus we kijken daar alvast naar uit. Professor Vandeyar, how are you? Welcome in Bruges.
I'm fine. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. Hi, everybody.
Everybody is answering with great enthusiasm, Professor.
I just want to say thank you so much for all of you taking the time to attend this presentation. I know it's late in the day and you must be very tired.
They are tired, but they are also very excited to hear from you, Professor. I will no longer steal your time. I suggest that the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I have so much to share with you, so I'm going to get right into it. Although I'd like to be more cordial and chat with you, but let us begin. I'm actually very honored to be at this conference and to have exposure and to share my passion with you, which is very much to do with diversity and social cohesion. And I think it's very well needed in the country today, in the world itself. So today I'm going to be looking at the contemporary teacher and a case for pedagogy of compassion. I think I whet your appetite a bit when I did a little snippet for the website that was put up on the website. And today I really like to share with you something that I think would make a big difference to our end users who are the learners in the classroom and hopefully set the scene for things to be better in the world, given what is currently happening in terms of the pending World War III that we are facing at the moment. I think this is very much needed in our world today. So let me begin. What I'd like you to do firstly is I'm going to be showing you 2 sets of images. And I will I will flick between the two of them. So I just want you to take a look at it and just think about what you think it's about. Okay, so this is the first set of images. And this is the second set. So let me do that again. The first set of images. I'll just give you a few minutes to look at it. And now the second set of images. So I'd just like to know, what do you think this is about? I think Dennis said he would ask somebody or pass the mic or something like that. But if not, we could just continue.
I will
Let me
throw
go
you
back
the cube.
again.
Yes, I have a contestant and it's not so far, so that's easy for me. Just talk into the cube and she will hear you.
I think it's about communication, and the first set, well, it's more digital and more individual. And in the second set, I see more people together in real life communication.
All right, thank you so much. You picked up on the idea of what I was trying to begin this presentation with. Basically, we're looking at hard skills versus soft skills in those sets, but you could also interpret it in the way that you've done. But I was hoping that you would pick up that the first set is very much technologically driven. So let me go back to that image. And I think this is where we are in the world at the moment. There is so much of emphasis on technology, and we are currently in Industry 5 with artificial intelligence. And I mean, if you look around, there are even toddlers and babies that are working with, iPads and digital things. And this seems to be a trend that is increasing. But at the same time, there are also negative aspects to this, and we need to strike a balance between the two. Because what you see in the second set of images is actually, like you correctly pointed out, communication and a kind of human-centeredness around this communication and active engagement with each other. Whereas if you look at the first set again, you can see very much everyone looking at their cell phones, and communication is happening in that regard. So in terms of what I'm trying to bring about here is the kind of emphasis on the first set, the digital world, and the second set, the human-centered kind of relationships that we need to build. And I think increasingly with what has been happening in the world and what's been happening in terms of technological advancements is this great kind of emphasis on digital. We are talking through at the moment, I'm doing an online presentation with you, but at least I'm talking to you, I can see you in the auditorium. So how do we balance the hard skills and the soft skills? Because at the same time, with the emphasis and stressed on digital learning and digital technology and moving into artificial intelligence, which is beneficial in its own way, there's also other things happening. There are other shifts in the world. So we're seeing with globalization, the migration flows that are happening. We're seeing currently, as I'm presenting to you right now, issues that we thought we could overcome many years ago. The likes of Russia are now attacking Ukraine, and the numbers of refugees that are flowing out of the country, and the pain and the sorrow that they are going through. And I don't think in their minds right now they're thinking about technology. The people that are suffering in Ukraine, there are much more impending things that have their attention. Things like food. They're sitting in a very cold climate with no food, no electricity, no water, the basics of life. So the migration flows, the globalization, the war. A few months ago, we had the Black Lives Matter in America. And how does that now talk to the soft skills? So what I'm trying to say here is we also need to concentrate on educating our learners and educating society by extension, and educating the future generation of leaders by extension about issues of relationship, about soft skills. It's not just about technology and hard skills, because then we are going to really lose the human-centeredness of our enterprise, which is actually educating people for better lives and giving them better life chances in life. So how do we create opportunities and create educational spaces where everyone can feel a sense of belonging and a feeling at home? And how do we address the glaring inequalities, where people are actually attacking each other over issues of resources and issues of land extension? And what kind of messages, what kind of lessons are we teaching the future generation and the young ones that are still coming up that it's fine to just concentrate on your laptop and sit in front of a TV the whole day and forget about the rest of the world and forget about the fact that we are human beings and we are relational human beings. And this is why there is so much of difficulty happening around the issue of relational human beings. And it's more about access, and it's also about access and success. Not only access and success in terms of people talk about, the digital divide and access and success, but also access and success in terms of soft skills, in terms of how do you educate your learners to become better human beings. I always say that education is nothing more than building the self-esteem of your learner. Because if you have a confident child, then that child is prepared to take on anything. So we need to look at how do we build the self-esteem of the child. And we need to create a balance or strike a balance between human-centeredness and what we are now currently en route to, which is Society 5.0, which is our fifth industrial revolution, where we find the benefits of artificial intelligence, but we also need to look at what are the negative aspects of that. And we need to alert our learners and we need to alert each other about how to create a balance between this human-centeredness so that we do not lose what is so important in life, our relational being in life and our relational being with each other on an equitable basis, where we can kind of have equality of cultural trade. These are some of the concepts that I will be talking to, and I've just kind of reacted to the images in this particular slide, given you a kind of taste of what I want to talk about. So I like this quote a lot. It says, only when a nation state is unified around a set of democratic values, such as human rights, justice, and equality, can it secure the liberties of cultural, ethnic, language, and religious groups and enable them to experience freedom, justice, and peace. Citizens who understand this unity, diversity, tension, and act accordingly do not materialize from thin air. They are educated for it. And this is where you, as contemporary teachers, come into play. How do you educate your learners for it so that they can manage this unity, diversity, tension? How do we create a better world where we do not have what we are seeing currently right now with Russia and Ukraine? We thought that after the Second World War, things would change. Human beings would take a different look, but we see the movement towards a Third World War. And we all sit back and watch in awe at what is happening. How do we prevent this from happening in the future? How do we educate the current set of learners who are going to be the future generation of leaders of the world, so that we can have the relations that we would like them to have? So the purpose of this presentation is to illustrate how citizens can be educated for it. Now, when we talk about how do we educate, it always works. Issues of diversity always center around changing mindsets. Because diversity is not something that I can say, I like this person today and I don't tomorrow. It's much deeper than that. It deals with your beliefs, your belief system, your values, and what you hold dear in life. It's everything that you have been brought up to believe. How do you change that overnight? You cannot. It takes time, but it also takes exposure. So changing mindsets often happen in two ways. It happens externally. Firstly, this is what we term systemic change. So for instance, where the educational institution kind of decides that they want to change, and then they institute certain policies, and it's externally driven. And you've got to always ask yourself, what is my institutional mirror? So when people look at my institution or my classroom or my educational space, what does it reflect? What does the mirror reflect? And very often we tend not to do that. I think that's the first step. And you will see later on as I progress through this presentation, I will be coming back to this institutional mirror. So the institution sometimes interrogates policies. We've got to look at that interrogation. These are all external. What is the ethos of reception? So when a person walks into your educational space, what is the kind of ethos of reception there? Do they feel a sense of belonging? Who is being represented and who is being left out? And all this relate to power relations, to interrogate power relations. It deals with what we say and do, but more importantly, it deals with what we do not say and do not do, because those silences also convey messages. And it deals with issues that go beyond just, race. It deals with issues of gender, age, socioeconomic, all the various diversities, disabilities that we want to talk about. So you've got to really interrogate those things. So sometimes systemic change is external. It comes with policies, and the school or the institution decides we want to change and this is the policy, and then it's imposed upon you. But there's also the other side of change, which is the internal. And this is very important, because even if systems do not change, you are the agent for change. And you got to really reflect and introspect and ask yourself, is what is happening out here what I'd like to see in the world? And if it's not, then how can I be the change that I want to see in the world? The famous words of Mahatma Gandhi. So how can you become agents of change? And it starts with the change in attitudes, beliefs, values, which actually is the core and essence of who you are. And then the mindsets would change. But attitudes, beliefs, and values actually run like knowledge in the blood, because it's passed on through ancestry. It's passed on as the truth, the only truth. And it's difficult for people to challenge that truth until you are exposed to multiple truths. So it really requires a kind of conversion or gestalt shift. And it requires experiential learning. What I mean by that is I can stand here and talk to you about prejudice and give you a definition of what I think prejudice is. And I can tell you what discrimination is. And I can tell you what racism is. But it would go in through one ear and come out of the other. But if I make you experience prejudice and discrimination through experiential learning, I actually put you through it, you will remember it for the rest of your life. So these are some of the things that I will talk about when I present the Pedagogy of Compassion theoretical framework, because it deals with these things of ethics of discomfort, pedagogic dissonance, multiplicity of voices. But I just wanted to give you a sense that with internal change, the agents need to be exposed to all these. Okay, let me move on. So as a contemporary teacher, you need to ask, what can I do at an individual level to develop my effectiveness as a change agent despite the system? Because very often we tend to say, at my institution, they don't want to promote this. I'm waiting for the policy and I'm too scared to do it. It would never happen. So if the system is not changing, what can you do as a contemporary teacher to address the inequalities in society? And they are glaring. I mean, COVID-19 has just unearthed even further digital divide, further lack of access, further inequalities in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of poverty. What do I do as an agent? Do I just sit back and wait for somebody to tell me to do it, or do I actually take up the gauntlet and try to make a difference in the world? And I would like to suggest that how do contemporary teachers then become agents of educational change and social cohesion? I'm going to go here. Are contemporary teachers ready to decolonize their minds and their ingrained belief and value systems? That's the first step. Are you ready to take that step? Are you ready to unlearn, relearn, and fundamentally transform as individuals? Or are you going to hold on to your stereotypical beliefs and truths because you believe that is the only truth in the world? And are you literate about the historical injustices and diverse intellectual debates within your disciplines? Why I point that thing about the disciplines is sometimes you only promote particular learning material in your classroom because you are unaware that there are multiple ways of looking at the world and there are multiple truths in the world, and you need to really educate the learner in your classroom is to expose them to those multiple truths and multiple realities and let the learner make their mind up rather than imposing one truth, which the learner then goes out into the world believing as the only truth. So contemporary teachers, their praxis needs to create conditions that democratize educational spaces, that make room for both individual and group identities within the institutional context, that create shared and negotiated understandings and practices while knowledge is being generated and disseminated. So you go in as a co-constructor of the knowledge, not as the only person with the knowledge and your learners are deficient, but you see your learners as assets and what they can contribute towards co-constructing the knowledge. And this is what we mean by multiple truths. So it would begin with changes in beliefs and understanding, the foundation for fundamental changes in conception. In individuals and intellectual contexts and in personal histories. So it's not that you believe this, it's because you have been exposed to a particular reality of the world, which you then believe is the true reality of the world. And it could be because you were educated in a particular institution, in a particular context, you come with your own personal history. You need to open your vision. You need to open up to the fact that there are different realities, different cultural perspectives of looking at things, that there are different ways of learning, there are different ways of attaining knowledge. And here we talk about the concept of equality of cultural trade. You know, very often we just say, we say the Arabic numerals. But nobody asks, why is it called the Arabic numerals? Because the numeral of 0 was created. Without 0, you cannot move forward. So it comes from a different cultural perspective. So there's much more that you can learn, and each of the cultures have something to contribute to the pool of knowledge. So how these subjective realities are addressed, and these are your own personal subjective realities, is crucial for whether potential changes become meaningful at the level of individual use of effectiveness. If you are not prepared to address your own subjective reality, you will continue as you are going on for the rest of your life. But if you begin to question, you are opening yourself up to so much more that is in the world. And we're going to talk about how you can begin this process when we talk about pedagogy of compassion. So one way of doing this, of addressing your subjective realities, is through pedagogy of compassion. So what is pedagogy of compassion? Pedagogy of compassion has 3 basic tenets. The first is dismantling polarized thinking and questioning one's ingrained belief system. The second one talks about changing mindsets, compassionately engaging with diversity in educational spaces. And the third talks about instilling hope and sustainable peace. And as I sit here right now, having just seen some gruesome images of what's happening in Ukraine, I think the third one really, we need to get to that point where we can get students or learners, we can instill a sense of hope in them and hopefully build sustainable peace for a better world. So what does dismantling polarized thinking and questioning one's ingrained belief system, what does it deal with? So firstly, it's the disruption of received knowledge. And here, all people can confront each other with their respective memories of trauma, tragedies, and triumph in the classroom. We have all been part of receiving particular forms of knowledge. As I sit here, I've been educated during the apartheid era in South Africa. And the curriculum was designed to promote apartheid. So the knowledge that I received was censored through the different forms. It was what the apartheid ideology wanted me to receive. And the textbooks were all taken, and the learning material and learning resources were all taken from a particular truth of knowledge. So how do I now, in post-apartheid, disrupt that received knowledge? How do I start questioning what I received as whether that was the only form of truth in the world? And I think you can see from where I'm coming that if I had to continue thinking that was the only form of knowledge, I would be in a very bad place right now. So how do we disrupt the received knowledge? And we do this through things called polite silences. So polite silences are actually the hidden resentments. They should be exposed. Indirect knowledge should be made explicit, and the potential and real harm discussed openly. So you've got to create opportunities for that to happen. It's very nice for me to be polite in a group of, when I'm with a group of people, and just be polite, and things that are really upsetting me, I just kind of, harbor it and keep quiet about it and just smile all the time and be polite to each other. That's not going to help. We need to openly express how we feel. We need to create opportunities for people in educational spaces to actually break the polite silences, to talk about what is upsetting for them, to talk about how they see inequalities, how it plays out. And these can play out in both overt and covert ways. And it plays out even in the academe. I'm sure many of you are sitting here, you have your corridor talk, whether it's even in the school, in the institution. You can see things that are going wrong, but then you just talk about it in the corridor and you are too scared to voice it higher up because of what the repercussions may be. And I think as change agents, we need to be brave enough to bring this to the attention of the relevant authorities. It needs to create spaces for dialogue to happen, to talk, to say, this is the way we do things, but how do you do it from your cultural perspective? Or do you think this is the only way that it's done? So that we have kind of dialogue, and it's not necessarily only intercultural dialogue, it's also intergender dialogue. I'm using culture and race as an example, but it cuts across all other forms of disabilities, all other forms of diversity. I often hear of some female academics who claim that they don't feel a sense of belonging. It's too male patriarchic in this institution. Then talk about it so that change can happen. And ultimately, it goes to questioning one's ingrained belief system. So a post-conflict kind of theory talks about disrupting received knowledge, polite sciences, dialogue, but I'm arguing it goes beyond that. You need to start questioning my beliefs, questioning your values. Is what I believe and what I value in life actually true? And now how do we do this? How do we move from this? If you're starting and you want to do this, this is where changing mindsets and compassionately engaging with diversity in educational spaces comes about. You've got to create a sense of pedagogic dissonance. So pedagogic dissonance is where you start questioning the truths, where it's no longer, where one's stereotypes are shattered. It's where you expose your education, your learners, or how can I say, anyone, to pedagogic dissonance, where you begin to shatter the stereotypes that you've created. And one incident of pedagogic dissonance is not going to make you shatter your stereotypes, but it is surely holds the potential to erode away at what you believe as the truth. So the more you have pedagogic dissonance, the more you will start questioning, is this the truth? It also talks to things like ethic of discomfort. Create discomfortable moments that make you start questioning. And it talks to fusing different horizons. Now, what I mean by fusing different horizons, I just want to read it. It's like looking at pedagogic dissonance, as I've just spoken about, ethic of discomfort that I've spoken about, a critical democratic outlook, creating educational spaces where all this can happen. And what I'm saying is we would like to propose living experience that Priya talks about and proactive commitment to compassionately engaging with diversity in educational spaces. And we purposefully use the word compassionately because we're moving from empathy to compassion. Empathy is where you say, okay, I understand you are suffering. I know you come from this background and I'm sorry. I empathize with you. I can put myself in your shoes. I empathize with you. And I think I've heard some of this through the media right now, when some Ukraine person came on TV and said, it's all well and good for you to send WhatsApps to say you empathize and you're sorry for what's happening in Ukraine. But why don't you take action? What are you doing about it? So compassion is when you start taking action to make a difference. And this is what we mean by compassionately responding to your students' voices. Don't just say, I sympathize, I empathize, but what am I going to do about it? And it's action with a sense of warmth, so that there's a sense of an ethos of caring and compassion that comes into play. And once you expose yourself to pedagogic dissonance, to ethic of discomfort, to a critical democratic outlook in life, to living experiences of people, what they are actually going through, to allowing for a multiplicity of student voices or multiplicity of participant voices, and compassionately responding, then those things start beginning to make a difference to your mindset, and then you start thinking differently, and that's when action comes into play. And then finally, the third tenet is instilling hope and sustainable peace. Jonathan Jensen talks about a post-conflict pedagogy that has to be founded on hope. You've got to create hope in the world. Freya talks about there can be no change without a dream, and there is no dream without hope. It is insufficient to pronounce hope. It should be acted upon. And this is the argument we are making with our compassion. Compassion says, put it into action, accompanied by warmth, care, and showing that you really care. Because then such transformation not only instills hope, but it also holds the promise for sustainable peace, so that we do not see ourselves where we are currently in terms of what is happening in Ukraine. So what are some of the practical ways of doing this? If you are a contemporary teacher, how can I begin making a change? And I like to begin with talking about what we say first and second order changes. You cannot take a neutral stance to diversity or inclusivity. You cannot sit on the fence. So when we talk about first order changes are like, for instance, if I come to your institution, your educational environment, and I walk into the foyer, what does the walls of the foyer shout out to me? What do all the medals in the glass cabinets that are so proudly displayed of, your, I'm not going to say soccer is South African, but maybe water polo or rugby or something like that. All those photographs in the glass cabinet and all the trophies, what are they shouting out? What message are they conveying to me? Okay. Is it making me feel a sense of belonging? Or am I getting a sense that I'm an alien here? I do not belong here. So the first order changes are things like your posters, what you put up on the walls in your classroom. Those are first order changes. First order changes are like, for instance, where there is policy, you were a monocultural school and now they've opened it up and it's allowing for diverse learners to come into your school. So the diverse learners come in and then you try to assimilate them into your culture. We got to move beyond that to second order changes. Second order changes is actually where you interrogate the curriculum. What am I teaching? What learning material am I using? What's a sense of power that's happening here? Who has knowledge of this? How does power play out in terms of the knowledge enterprise? Who will benefit from the type of assessments I'm doing? So if my assessments are all written assessments, how does it talk to a child that comes from a background of storytelling or oral mythology where there isn't written? So those are like your second order changes. And we've got to move beyond that. We've got to, as I said, and in South Africa, and I think you recall the 2016 protest actions about decolonization of education, and I think most countries are moving in that direction as well, the decolonization of education. That's what we are talking about when we talk about second order changes. I also like to use the metaphors of mirrors and windows. I'm looking at the time. Mirrors are a metaphorical mirror. So when a person walks into your environment, into your educational space, do they see themselves and their identity reflected in that space? Or do they, because is the identity being affirmed? Can they say, oh, there are people like me that exist in this world? Your metaphorical mirror. The metaphor of the window is, if you have a monocultural set of learners in your classroom, you are duty bound. It is your responsibility to open the window and teach them about other cultures in the world, because your learners cannot be isolated. Your classroom is a microcosm of society. When they go out into society, they are going to see people that look different from them. They are going to meet them at shopping malls. They are going to meet them on the roads. And if you haven't prepared them for this, you have done an injustice to your learners, because they do not know how to react to this diversity. And the only form that they can put up is offensive or defensive. So it's your job to open the window and teach them about all the other diversities that are prevalent in society. And it's because there's a lack of this that we see so much of conflict in society and the world today. I spoke about equality of cultural trade. This is where all cultures come to the knowledge pool and share their ideas. Another important thing is the invisible knapsack. So just as your learners walk into the classroom with their knapsack that is filled with their crayons and pens and pencils, well, I shouldn't be saying that, I should say with their tablets and their cell phones and the rest, if we talk about what's happening currently, they also walk in with an invisible knapsack. And that invisible knapsack contains the entire life world. It contains what they've learned at home. It contains their cultural norms, their cultural beliefs, their backgrounds. It all is in that knapsack. Your job is to view that invisible knapsack as an asset, as opposed to a deficiency. So how do you, as a contemporary teacher, build scaffolds between the invisible knapsack and the new knowledge? How can you see what is contained in the invisible knapsack as an asset and build on that asset? Very often we see it, we view our learners as in a deficiency mode, and we are pouring this knowledge into them. Our learners come with riches. They come with a wealth of understanding the world when they enter your classroom. We need to realize we can use that, and we can see that as a different truth. I spoke about different truths and multiple realities. And engagement happens in the classroom. This is why I say you should see yourself as a contemporary teacher. You should see yourself as a co-constructor with your learners of knowledge. And then we speak about culturally compatible educational spaces, classrooms and corridors. This would address some of the first order changes. We speak about an anti-bias approach. And ultimately, it's to create educational spaces where all can feel a sense of belonging and a feeling at home. And this should be an institution or school-wide initiative for it to be sustainable. Sorry, I know I'm late. So other ways are experiential learning workshops. Put the person in the shoes of another. Walk in the shoes of another to feel what it's like to be discriminated against, or to just have your entire life world ignored. Your knapsack, it's ignored in the curriculum. It's ignored in the knowledge enterprise. What would it feel like if that was the case for you? So showcase good practice in culture-rich institutions. Create consciousness of diversity and see it as an asset or a wealth or a richness rather than in negative terms. And draw on evidence-based pedagogies. There's a number of them. We talk about culturally compatible pedagogy, culturally congruent pedagogy, culturally sustainable pedagogy, socio-culturally responsive education. for that humaneness to come in, the relations that I spoke about earlier on. So then, I'm sorry, this is just the last of my slides. What should the contemporary teacher do? They should reflect and affirm diverse groups of people, and I gave you some ideas of how to do that. Your curriculum and your practice should be grounded in the lives of your students, because if that's the case, they would be interested in what you're doing and they would want to participate in the learning enterprise. It should be critical. It should open up. You should instill critical thinking in your learners. Get them to start engaging with each other. Get them to start sharing their reality and see that there are multiple realities, and let them negotiate around those multiple realities. In so doing, you are enforcing Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, because they've got to negotiate, and intrapersonal skills, intrapersonal intelligence comes in. How do I negotiate with people? So you are teaching much broader than just the curriculum. Interpersonal skills, intrapersonal skills, kinesthetic skills, bodily skills, not just learning literacy and numeracy. And this is what we mean by when you're getting people to engage with each other and share their multiple realities. That's what's critical about it. Be pro-justice. I talk about social, cultural, and cognitive justice education. It should be informed by an ethic of care and compassion. It should be participatory and experiential, and ultimately lead to hopeful, joyful, kind, visionary. Get your students to see the vision of the world that they would like to live in 20 years' time. It should obviously be based from an activist point of view. Academically rigorous and culturally sensitive. I'm so aware that I'm out of time, that I'm racing now. Okay, so finally, the conclusion. Teachers not only need to be able to raise the critical consciousness of learners, but they need to adopt an epistemology of compassion and to implement a pedagogy of compassion in order to enable learners to become active, critical, and democratic citizens imbued with a sense of common humanity and compassion. Becoming an agent of transformative change may challenge the very premise of teachers' identities and practices, but by empowering learners to exert influence on their world, contested spaces in schools and society can become shared places of hope and peace. So now I just want to read something to you. When TV came to my house, I forgot how to read books. When the car came to my doorstep, I forgot how to walk. When I got the mobile in my hand, I forgot how to write letters. When computers came to my house, I forgot spellings. When the air conditioner came to my house, I stopped going under the tree for cool breeze. When I stayed in the city, I forgot the smell of mud. By dealing with banks and cards, I forgot the value of money. With the smell of perfume, I forgot the fragrance of fresh flowers. With the coming of fast foods, I forgot to cook traditional cuisines. Always running around, I forgot to stop. And lastly, when I got WhatsApp, I forgot how to talk. And I think that is so profound, because if you go back to the first image, you see everyone talking on their phones. They're just sitting with their phones in front of them. And that's the point I was making. We need to take care of the human-centered relations. Otherwise, we're heading for disaster in the world. So going back to what I put up on the website, C is for care, compassion, cultural, critical, collaborative, and connected. Connected in terms of technology and connected in terms of relations. O is ontological, addressing the nature of reality. N is for now. You need to take action, be timeous and timely. T is for the teacher, that's you. E is for empathy, epistemology, ways of knowing, gain and understanding of knowledge. M is morality. We are ethically duty-bound to prepare our learners for the future world, and we should be guided by our moral compass. P is for pedagogy. O is for online, which we are all very busy with, which COVID kind of exacerbated it. R is for resilient, robust, rigorous. It takes a lot of resilience to be in this game of education. and to be a contemporary teacher. You are competing with so many other attractive things. I always say it shouldn't be education, it should be edutainment, because you need to edutain your learners to keep their interests. A is for agency and accountability. The buck stops with you. R is for responsive and responsibility. And Y, it all begins with you. You need to take that first step to become an agent if you want to be a contemporary teacher. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry I went a bit over time. Thank you. I don't know if there are questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor. I don't know if you heard, but there is a very loud applause for you at the end of your keynote. And I must say, your time management is spot on because we started a bit later. So no worries, you did it exactly within the scheduled time. So thank you very much. I am sure this was a very inspiring keynote, and I am sure your message will be carried along throughout this audience. Thank you very much, Professor, and we wish you a pleasant night in Pretoria tonight.
Thank you very much. I just want to say to the participants, it's really been a pleasure for me to share my passion with you, and I could see you clapping. I didn't get the sound, so thank you for that. But if you have any questions or you'd like to discuss anything with me, I know there's no time to do it right now. I'm more than willing to take anything via email. So if Dennis, you want to share my email with the audience, you're more than welcome to. And thank you so much for listening to me. Enjoy your day further, and I know you're very tired, so I hope this is the end and you're going home to relax. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good evening.
You too.
Zo, collega's, met deze bijdrage zit het inhoudelijke luik er voor vandaag op. Na deze morgen onze themalijn ruimte maken voor professionele groei bij Simon Bozard was het deze keer heel duidelijk het balanceren tussen identiteit en diversiteit. Wees niet gevreesd, er is nog een mooi cultureel programma die er zit aan te komen, denk ik toch voor de meesten onder ons hier vandaag. Hier ziet u eigenlijk de starttijden van dat culturele programma. Let wel, hiervoor moest vooraf geregistreerd worden. Voor wie daar effectief voor heeft ingetekend, geven we graag mee niet al te lang te blijven keuvelen, omdat uiteraard het nog eventjes is tegen je in het centrum bent. Dat zal niet gemakkelijk zijn, want uiteraard tot 6 uur is er nog een drankje voor jullie voorzien. Maar is evengoed de informatiebeurs nog steeds volop aan de gang. En ook de posterbeurs zal het komende half uur nog goed bemand zijn. Dus nog voldoende te beleven op de campus ook. Ja. Afsluitend geef ik graag mee dat morgen vroeg opnieuw plenair zal gestreamd worden in lokaal D012. Voor wie het plenaire gedeelte toch iets te druk was op volle capaciteit, weet dan dat er op de D012 ook een livestreaming van het plenaire gedeelte is, waar je iets meer ruimte hebt, waar je misschien iets comfortabeler kan zijn. Trouwens, ook doorheen de dag is daar ook videoanimatie te zien vanuit studenten van Lucas School of Arts. Dus om eventjes het hoofd leeg te maken, kan je daar ook enkele korte fragmentjes gaan bekijken. Het was een eerste dag met opnieuw veel persoonlijk contact. We hebben er allemaal naar uitgekeken. Vergeet ook die contacten misschien niet vast te leggen op de gevoelige plaat via onze fotobooth. Je hebt er misschien al voorbij gelopen zonder dat je het wist. Maak er zeker ook gebruik van. We wensen jullie nog een fijne avond. Misschien tot morgen. En oh ja, morgen vroeg is er koffie.